Welcome back to SoulNet, friends. How many of us can relate to the pursuit of perfection, either wanting to look a certain way, be the perfect parent, the perfect partner, have the perfect home, or even just awaiting the perfect time to have a hard conversation that's weighing on our hearts? What is the cost to us and our families of this relentless pursuit? And does it take us further and further away from our authentic selves? Let's explore.
I just want to kind of look at it from a developmental perspective. How did perfectionism come to be as part of the psyche? Really? Because I love that you bring this subject up, Dana. And it really comes from a way for our psyche to protect ourselves from perceived threat. And that threat could be that we'll be exiled from the family or the community if we're not good enough. So it does have a useful place in our evolutionary biology in terms of it helps us belong to the tribe, but it's misguided because it's our younger parts that are like, okay, if I do this or if I behave like that, I won't get exiled. I'll be included. I'll stay safe. So these perfectionist parts, like you're saying, what's underneath the surface is they're trying to protect us from perceived threat. And from a developmental perspective, as children, perceived threat most of the time is either too much of something that is overstimulating or too little of something like neglect. So either too much or too little, depending on the situation. And if perfectionism helps us as developing humans to lessen the too much of something or get more if we're experiencing neglect, then perfectionism becomes the behavior to survive the situation. Because if I am excellent, then I'll be not neglected. Or if I'm excellent, then I won't get hit or screamed or yelled at or criticized or whatever it is, we'll avoid the threat. So it is a useful piece for us to still belong to the tribe. But now as adults, if that pattern has continued on, how can we help ourselves to just embrace that life is this, it's the ebb and flow, and you can have areas of excellence. Yay, fantastic. Yeah. And you can have areas of non-excellence. And that makes us whole, right? That integration piece. Yeah.
Yeah, the integration.
You guys, I feel like midlife and the menopause journey humbles us in so many ways, including this need to let go of these perfectionist tendencies that we may have had since our earlier years of childhood. So I thought we could kind of hash out, some of the ways that we recognize these tendencies that we have and how we move through them.
I think you're right, because menopause, for me anyway, I think I've realized that perfection is an illusion, and all these ways that we grow up wanting to be young and beautiful, and then we end up old and trying to be beautiful. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Old and beautiful.
Especially in a society that continues to remind us to go into comparison and that you want to preserve this beautiful aspects, right? And it's hard. It reminds us every day in the mirror of the wrinkles that show up, of the energy that we don't have anymore, the incompleted projects that we just have to let go of because we don't have the capacity.
Yeah. And we're also discovering what's more important too. We're more connected to what's actually important to us. So we're able to direct our energy more intentionally than in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. I feel like we're all much more intentional, and that helps reduce the perfectionism. I love that you brought up this topic, Dana. Something that could be fun for our listeners is that I just had this image of, let's share about a perfectionist memory.
Okay.
Since I, suggested this, I'll put myself in the hot seat. So I would say that, because I did modeling in high school for a little bit, and I was that exotic, mixed breed Heinz 57.
God, back then it was exotic. I mean, it always is exotic, but back then you were like, wow, who is this
Totally.
walking down the hallway runway?
And so my conditioning back then was like, okay, perfect the looks, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine how challenging my journey would have been if I had body dysmorphia around weight. I didn't, just because of my genetics, but I can only imagine how challenging it would have been, because I remember looking at my knees going, oh, there's a little bit of fat here on my knees. If only that would be like cut off, then the legs would be perfect. This is like what modeling,
Yeah, it
injects
does.
into your brain, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
and like the perfect makeup techniques, and which we see on Instagram now. I mean, like I
Yeah.
have stepdaughters that are like drop dead gorgeous, and it's all about perfection and the
Mm-hmm.
picture perfect, and it's part of our humanity. It's part of the 20s. In our 20s, we're looking for mates to reproduce with. So, we want to choose the healthy looking mate, which is also connected to perfectionism.
Yep.
But that I just remember that, like the obsession with looks
Yeah.
in our teens.
I've got a couple of memories, and I'll give a sports analogy just because it feels appropriate. So I grew up ski racing among
Yeah.
other activities, and it was a big. My mother was very available growing up. My father less so, because he was out providing and he worked a lot to create for the family. But the one bond that we actually shared was skiing. That was something that he brought over from Austria, and he had a love and passion for it. So we
Right.
were raised as skiers. And so I was quite a good young ski racer. And I remember this moment, and I was on the Dave Murray at Whistler. And after the first run, we do 2 runs for races and stuff like that. So my first run, I was like leading the way. And I think I was probably 14 at this point. And I was like number 1. And I was so jazzed. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. It was a really hard course. And it was a really it was a next level up in competition. My dad was there. He was like gatekeeping. And so those were those bonding moments. Well, my second run, I come out of the gate, I hit a like big rut, and I went off the course. I missed the next gate. And then if that happens, you're disqualified. So it's a DNF, right? You don't finish. And so that was just like such a disappointing moment. And over time, racing was never my happy place. Eventually, I ended up teaching instead. And I let go of racing because I wasn't doing it for myself. I was doing all of this to please my dad and try and create a bond with him. And so, of course, when I blow that one opportunity to win the race, my little shame self just kind of like was embarrassed in front of my teammates, like everything, right? It was just a hard moment.
Oh my God.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, because you are just like you are a stellar athlete.
Totally.
Thank you.
So I don't have a perfectionist story to share from childhood, because I was literally living in such a mess. There wasn't any adult in my life that was encouraging me to be perfect or encouraging me on that pursuit of excellence. So I would just say my experience was not about perfectionism as much as it was about just being a good girl.
Yeah.
Just being a good friend, just being a good student. Just don't step out of line. Don't cause any more problems for yourself. Don't bring any more unwanted attention on yourself. So that was my experience. So it was less about perfectionism as it was about just being good,
Yeah.
a good girl, and avoiding threat. So that really resonates for me.
Wow.
And I'm just unpacking that. And so stay tuned, listeners, because menopause breaks you open, and then you confront the little part in you that is like, well, hang on, we can't be good all the time. And who are we being good for?
Mm-hmm.
Who are we being perfect for? Who are we being good for? So I think that it's kind of in the same lane.
I think it's also kind of fine line of perfection, and then also like it being okay to strive for excellence.
Yes.
But if it's always about it being perfect, it's kind of like we talk about like failure to launch, right? I have these conversations with clients sometimes where they're talking about this dream that they want to pursue, whether it's I want to take photographs when I have more time, I'm going to do this. When work settles down, I'm going to do this. instead of taking the opportunities now, I feel like creating something perfect takes us away from actually living and experiencing our lives. And so differentiating between, I'm achieving something, but I'm also going to have that balance point, and I'm going to take the time to go and take photos or whatever is being called to. And I think that's where it becomes, really, dysfunctional, for lack of a better word.
On that note, it reminds me of when I think about perfectionism, I just would offer, like, are you doing this? Are you pursuing this quote unquote perfect thing for yourself? Or is it because you're afraid of being exiled? Are you afraid of not being seen as good enough? Are you afraid of criticism? Like, really start to ask yourself and lean into like what you might be afraid of if you don't produce this perfect thing. And is it for yourself or is it for others? Because if it's for others, then you are compromising or potentially betraying your truth, your true self. As young people, we just don't know to ask the questions. But as we get older, we're like, hang on, who are we doing this for?
Yeah.
Why are we spending all this energy to produce something perfect when I don't even give a shit about it?
Totally.
I think you just beautifully explained the difference between pursuit of excellence and avoiding threat. So if we're avoiding threat, then that's the fear piece. We're in fear, and that has us like kind of do behaviors so that we will still belong. And that's an external perspective or an external kind of lens, right? Like, do I belong? Am I good enough? But if there's that, like, I'm doing this and I'm like obsessed with this. It's an internal locus of attention.
Yeah.
And like, I just think of my eldest son in surfing. He's obsessed. And it's that pursuit of excellence with the relationship with nature and kind of like that young male testosterone experience of conquering and being a part of something. And there's such a like intense connection with the present moment that the rest of the world dissolves away. And that kind of pursuit of excellence has you feel alive.
Yeah,
know?
that's what I was just feeling.
Yeah, it feels alive.
Yeah. Well, that's actually an interesting piece. I think you helped me to think about that feeling of aliveness versus the feeling of being perfect.
Fear, yeah.
Those are two very, very different things. And I think that we can get lost in this, is it perfect? And we literally can become numb to feeling alive on that trajectory of being perfect. Maybe it's the pursuit of presence, not excellence, but presence and that aliveness that we should actually be leaning into.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when I'm pursuing excellence in my midlife, it's my relationship with me. I'm like really either obsessed with something and I'm so present with it and I'm literally joined with it and I can't let go because it's just, I'm enjoying the high of being in that experience. Like I was shared with you guys yesterday, I was doing fire training, ground support with my son. And we're entering structures with crowbars and tools where I'm like on an adrenaline high going boom, boom, boom. And, they're in there with like massive fire in a structure building that they're putting out. And we did the jaws of life on vehicles and we did all kinds of stuff. And that pursuit of excellence was coming from teamwork and intense presence. There was nothing around perfection. It was just like, do the thing. You're fully alive while you're doing the thing. And as you practice doing the thing, feeling alive, you get better at it.
Yeah, you do. Well, I think what I heard right there was the relationship to self.
Yeah.
I think when it's for you, it comes out in aliveness and beauty and conquering and warrior and something so much bigger. Right. And the work that you end up producing is magnificent.
Perfectly imperfect.
I love that phrase. Yeah. So what can we offer our listeners, ways to maybe like start letting go of that perfectionist nature, find a path back to ourselves?
Well, I'll speak from just working with clients. It seems to really help when people understand that they've been maybe pursuing behaviors that are obsessively perfectionistic, so to speak, from a place of avoiding fear in their own system. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of not belonging, fear of not being good enough. So if we can establish that first and feel that in the body and notice that there's an energy pattern in me that is scared of being rejected or abandoned or not good enough or left behind or not included, all of that. And then develop a relationship with that energy pattern.
Mm-hmm. Your relationship to self.
Yeah.
I think that my invitation is to think, who are you doing it for? And return to what you yourself wants from this moment, you yourself needs. And it's often just loving kindness towards that part of yourself. I mean, somebody just told me, and I'll offer this too, if you have a dog or a pet or something that just unconditionally loves you, love that part of yourself like you love on your dog. Like when you or your cat, the way that you love, the way that you touch your pet, you love on your pet. Totally. Do that with your heart in that moment. Yeah.
I would also, offer up that these conversations always circle back to self-awareness. So what ways in your life can you continue to cultivate that awareness of what's going on in your body, what's going on in your mind, and what are you noticing in your actions? And when you start to notice that through your own work that we've always talked about, meditation, journaling, anything that brings self-reflection, or of course, in time with others, with therapists, that, these things start to come up. Can you notice them with that curiosity? Can you notice them with kindness and compassion for yourself to explore, a little bit deeper into where that part of yourself is dividing from your authentic self? Because this is really where we're all trying to get ourselves back to, is who we are, not who the world thinks we are. Right?
Having friends like you guys has helped me to see myself. These soulful conversations that we have, the sharing of our stories, the vulnerability has allowed me to lean in more safely to see those fears, right? Because I feel safe with friends like you. So I would say, please find your friends that see you and love you through all the messiness.
I agree, Meg. I feel like it's a perfect opportunity to share a quote by Brené Brown. Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us, when in fact, it's the thing that's really preventing us from taking flight.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Thanks for joining us, SoulNet.
Please help us connect with you. Follow us, SoulNet, on the various socials, on Spotify, Instagram, and Facebook. We love hearing from you. Thank you, listener community. Big love to you all.